What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Voice, and you're here for another episode of the Facts Project. Today, very special guest. Haven't had him on here in a very long time. Troy Jeffrey Allen, the voice of Previews World and the creator of RexCo Comics. Thank you for being here, brother.
What's up, man? Well, I will be quick to say I am not the creator of RexCo Comics. I'm the co-creator. I always got to point that out. Yeah. It was created by me and Nick Allen, and Nick's done some really cool stuff over there as well. So definitely check his work out.
Yeah, and look, man, I look forward to basically anything that you put out because as of recently, you've had the opportunity to put out a very appealing homage graphic novel for ODB, Old Dirty Bastard, and you always seem to emphasize yourself in the world of not only comics but also music itself, especially hip hop. Because this cover behind me, we talked about maybe around like 2 years.
Last time.
Yeah.
Actually more like 3, really.
Three now.
Yeah, because it's almost April. That came out 4/20/2020.
Yeah, and it
Oh,
just
you know what? No, I'm sorry. 4/20/2021. It came out the following year because passed away in October of 2020. There you go.
Yeah, passed away in October and didn't tell anybody until New Year's Eve, damn near.
Right.
Only in MF Doom fashion.
Right. This is the perfect way.
But yet we're here to talk about a project that's near and dear to your heart because it's something that you've curated over a course of time and wanted to put out there so that like the emphasis of what you were basically putting out there into the world. Of course, you've totally enamored yourself in the world of comics, and essentially, of course, as well, wanted to put your stamp on the fact that of how much you love hip hop and how much you love music as a whole. So essentially, this passion project that you wanted to put out is at most not only a weekly, but maybe like a monthly magazine that you
Well,
want
that's the hope. That's the goal in the long
right,
term.
right.
First we got to get this thing out, and for the time being, I'm proposing an annual. And based off of how well this is received, we can start talking about maybe going to a publisher with this so that we can get it out on a monthly basis to a larger audience. But I wanted to make sure that it starts off like a small press independent book. I had to establish what this is. You know what I mean? And it has to be established by me before we even start branching off into what other people expect or want, you know what I mean, from it. So, and that's just me knowing that's just me having worked with so many people and never having really done a project that's just me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's right. That's really why that was important to me.
Well, one of the things that you basically describe is the fact that your mantra in almost the beginning pages of this is defy existing barriers and restraints put on Black creatives.
Yes.
Now, how do you basically forego that conclusion when you're describing that so boldly?
So we all saw, have you been following the news today?
Yes, I have.
Did you see what happened to Bo LaMaya? LaMoya, is it
I
LaMaya or
did.
LaMoya?
X-Men 97, all of a sudden, pretty much out of nowhere, and we don't have an explanation, but
No.
the gentleman is no longer with us as far as the creative control of X-Men 97 or writing Blade.
Yeah, right. So he's been pulled from the show. He's not coming back. And that's kind of what I mean, right? Like you kind of have to look at that situation and you kind of have to understand that, okay, creative disputes happen, right? But at the end of the day, no one's going to let you tell your story as well as you are going to tell your story. And not to rag on people. Look, I'm a Marvel guy. I saw the X-Men 97 commercial trailer.
Yeah,
I was surprised by how hype I was about it. You know what I mean?
it's true.
Yes, it's true. It looks very good. But the thing here is that at the end of the day, those are Disney characters. You know what I mean? They don't belong to us. Just like Black Panther does not belong to us. Just like Miles Morales. Look, Spider-Verse, I will fight anybody who tells me Spider-Verse is a bad movie. You know what I mean? But like I literally was talking to somebody this weekend at a bar about how good that movie was. Like, you know what I mean? But at the same time, Miles Morales doesn't belong to us. Miles Morales was created by 2 white people.
This is true.
And I just kind of see this trend, and this is not a radical concept, but I just keep seeing this trend where we're supporting these IPs that don't belong to us, right?
This is
and And Afrofutures is about consolidation. It's
Hmm.
about bringing us into a space where we can tell all the crazy shit we want to tell. Like, you know what I mean? Like all the stuff that's been pulled away because it's not palatable to a certain type of audience, whether that be white or even like conservative black people, or you know what I mean? Like it runs the gamut of like, let's just go wild and see how far we can push this. And if it makes people uncomfortable, so be it.
This is true because most of the indie creators that I get to speak to on a weekly basis
Hmm.
range. You know,
Hmm.
not all,
Yes.
you don't like to like consider the repeated mantra of black people are not a monolith, but
Hmm.
the aspect that we get to go into high fantasy, the aspect that we get to go into sci-fi, the aspect that we get to go into horror, and the fact that we get to delve into the visual medium of comics on
Yeah.
an everyday basis because you look at Kickstarters and you see them there, but
Yeah,
they don't get
absolutely.
the same public light that a lot
Hmm.
of others get.
Hmm. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And like, I'm actively kicking around whether or not you want to put on Kickstarter, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Mhm.
Maybe it just goes right to my store. I don't know yet. I'm still going back and forth about the benefits of that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this magazine, we haven't said we haven't said what it is yet. The
No, we
magazine
have
is
not.
called the magazine is called Afrofutures.
Right.
And so the idea here is that, like, from our understanding, Afrofuturism is about envisioning the world beyond with us in it, right?
Mhm.
And like us being the protagonists of those stories. And so, I think some people confuse it with science fiction exclusively, or fantasy exclusively,
Yeah.
or magical surrealism exclusively. You know what I mean? A lot of people are trying to find definitions for it, but the point is to not define it.
Mhm.
And so Afrofutures is really embracing that. There's going to be a little bit of everything in every issue, and that's the goal, is to kind of like run the gamut. So,
That and see that's an excellent foretold tale because the way that it's kind of constructed and in the way that you basically gave me the essence of thank you for the advanced copy by the way of the
mhm.
lookbook.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
way that it's constructed, of course, there's uh more of a mantra in the beginning of the lookbook. And then
Hmm.
of course, after the essentially the collaborations of basically yourself and Nelson Blake, am I correct?
Yeah, that's one of the artists on the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're almost bringing forth a lot of fictional mythical characters within the black
Hmm.
community, whether it's
Yep.
John Henry, Ace Harlem, Kizzy Harlem, Streetwise Hercules, Divine Diva Savannah, but
Hmm.
you incorporated them in such a way. It was like you haven't heard these stories before, and
No.
yet I'm going to tell them to you in a certain manner that maybe only you could understand
Hmm.
because the specific reader that's reading it
Hmm.
is more so just in delving it like a person like myself that can incorporate it into just their psyche, especially from the black community's concern.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I mean, I'm really big on mythology. That's always been a big thing with me.
Same.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I mean, because it really does, our legends, first of all, and I've said this on other talks, but like, stories are all we have left, period. You know what I mean?
True.
Like when you're dead, all we have left of you are stories. You know what I mean? And the master narrative. I'm not trying to be too like, I'm not trying to be too militant, but I'm also doing a lot of reading, right?
Hmm.
And so,
Yes.
like, the master narrative has been allowed to create legends and create myths. You know what I mean? And that goes from everything from Odin to U.S. presidents. You know what I mean? And I kind of have felt for a long time that our stories always get cut short, and they always get cut short because of corporate doesn't understand it. They get short because there's no funding for them, like there are other projects. They get cut short because of the simple fact that people just don't understand the culture. You know what I
This is
mean?
true.
And what I really wanted to do here is, like, I wanted to make sure that one of the things I do, at least in the stories I'm telling, in this particular first issue, is to pluck up characters from mythology, or characters from our past, fictional characters from our past, public
Yeah.
domain characters, or even real life historical figures like Josephine Baker, and give them a new arc. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so that's a big thing. So, and this is, of course, a comics magazine. It's definitely 17 plus. And a big part of this is that I'm making a 17 plus because I want people to cut free. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
want them to be able to explore their Black creative expression. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And another part of that is the mythology building. And so for my stories, I'm taking a character like John Henry, and I'm taking a character like John Henry's a folklore hero, and I'm taking a character like Ace Harlem, who only had one comic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at least one comic by the creator. I know other people are actively have been trying to incorporate him in other stuff over
Hmm.
the years, but really he's only had one comic. Um, and give him 80 years of backstory.
Mm.
Like, you know what I mean? The same thing with Lion Man. This is from All Negro Comics #1 from the 1940s book. Uh, and getting them lineage. And, why doesn't Lion Man get award? Batman gets award. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
just going there with these things. What happens if John Henry just pops up in 2012 and he's like, I've been alive this whole time? You know?
That would be
Um,
insane.
you know? And actually the story that I'm talking about in specific is a book called All Negro Squad, and
Hmm.
it's a superhero book. It takes place during the second inauguration of President Obama. And the idea is that we are going to explore the nature of myths, of legends. We're going to do that through the US presidency, but we're also going to do it through the backstory of these heroes and how they all kind of come together to this big moment. And also politics, the myth of politics as well.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a fun one. And then the Josephine Baker story, which is going to be part of ongoing, I think, for this book, for this magazine, is, you know, let's just explore the spy thing some more. I'm not
Yeah.
the first person to do that, but I just like, why can't she get her Indiana Jones moment? Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I think it was only more than recently that people found out, and people continue to find out
Hmm.
that Josephine Baker was a CIA operative,
Hmm.
based over in Europe during that time, and was working as a subsequent spy
Hmm. Hmm.
for the United
For the
States.
French, right?
Yeah,
For the
for
French. So yeah, it's a lot of avenues narratively you can go,
mhm,
and that stuff is really fascinating. And we do play with the aspects of spycraft and all the cloak and dagger stuff. And,
mhm,
I'm trying to find the stories that make sense for, something a post World War II spy thriller. And we're
mm.
just going to do it with Josephine Baker. So there's some fun stuff in there.
Yeah, how do you feel like you have the opportunity to correlate, uh, mythological fiction with historical fact?
I don't think I'm equipped to do it, but I'm going to do it. So there's that. I mean, there is a line, right? Like there are if we're going to be talking about our culture in these larger senses, and like, about what's been taken from people, the other flip side of that is that you don't want to be part of the problem for another community, right?
True.
So a lot of that is just making sure that you are studying, that you are learning and listening to other people. And I struggle with that. Like, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
Like,
right,
well, we
right.
all struggle with that, but you kind of have to acknowledge that you struggle with that. And so you kind of look at the history. And the funny thing about history is we repeat a lot of patterns.
This is
So a
true.
lot of stuff that we're going through now, we were going through 30 years ago, 80 years ago. It's taken a new form, whether it's been, the industrial revolution to the digital age. It just kind of shifts about the things that affect society. Racism hasn't gone away. You know
No.
what I mean? It just takes a different form. And so, you have to acknowledge that. And so if you're telling your fictional story, you kind of go, well, I want to be reckless here, but this is maybe a little bit too much. And hopefully you find the middle line, in the process. So,
So how long has this concept been in play as far as Afrofutures is concerned? Because I
mhm,
know recently, well, I also know you're from the DMV,
mhm,
so
mhm,
it's not beneath you to actually like see Black people in a better plight in the physical form in
mhm.
your daily on an everyday basis. A lot of us
All
don't
right.
get to see that, especially I can't even say like people down south or people over here in the Northeast, but the DMV is special.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, I mean, it's Chocolate City,
Yes, it is.
and it's unique in a way that, like, when I hear other nerds talk about their experiences in other areas of the country, Black nerds in particular, when I hear them
Mhm.
talk about their other experiences in the country, I kind of have a hard time to relate because I've been very fortunate in the fact that, like, I was in a largely Black area,
Mhm.
like pretty much that stretched from DC into like a good quarter of Maryland. You know what I mean?
Right, right, right.
I went to a high school that was mostly Black. I went to a junior high school that was mostly Black and and Latino, and yeah, I was always exposed to other cultures, and I think that's the New York gets a reputation for the melting pot, right?
It does.
But DC also very much has that, and the DC metro area also very much has that. So yeah, that's an important part of my background.
Yeah, because of course that emboldens the thought process, because not only do you get to learn for yourself exactly what culture actually stands for, but the elders in your community, of course,
Hmm.
pretty much embolden the fact that you're able to look at it historically
Hmm.
as a means for you to obtain the knowledge that you wanted to create it to be who you are today and create the stories that you want to create.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, I'm one of those people that like I like talking to old people, even when I was a kid.
Same.
Like, and I made a joke a couple of months back on my Facebook, which I was like, if you pass an older black woman and she looks at you and smiles, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's one of those things where, it's just that I like, yeah, I've always wanted to be the grumpy old man. And so now I'm officially here. You know what I mean? And so part of that is just like, you just listen to the older folk around you, and
Now, saying
don't get in older folks' conversations, but just
this is
listen.
true. But in saying that, as somebody who's been in the community,
Mm.
or better yet, even the comic community for this long, have you taken the wisdom from elders in the way you've curated the way you talk about comics? Has anybody ever like talked to you outside of yourself to tell you
Mm.
about like how things should be constructed?
I mean, I'm kind of obsessive in terms of I need to know how things work. And to answer your question, yes. The short answer is yes. Like, and um, a big part of the scam that I've been doing for like the last 6 years at this point of working for Diamond Comic Distributors is that I get to interview creators. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And so I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with John Romita Jr. I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with Frank Miller and Dan DiDio. You know what I mean? I've been fortunate enough to talk to Todd McFarlane at length and Garth Ennis at length about their careers.
Hmm.
And you discover there's no one right way, right?
Right.
And that the wrong way is always evolving. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So you just kind of shift and you kind of understand that the most important thing you can do is tell your story and then hope that other people jive with that story.
Sure.
Um, and that's actually the big lesson I get from a lot of these guys, like I and women. I see, I got to talk to Karen Berger from Vertigo. I got to talk to Shelley Bond from Vertigo. They would tell me about like Vertigo in the 1990s. You know what I mean? Like when Preacher and Sandman were coming out.
Yeah, man. Look.
you know and and you kind of like you see the crisscrossing of some of the stories sometimes, right?
Hmm.
And but you also discover that uh you also discover the process. You also discover what good editors do, and you also discover what bad editors do, and you also discover what are the expectations of the big two, and what are and like how that shifts when you go independent, and like you learn all these ins and outs.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's been hugely influential in my development creatively. So
It definitely seems like it, because in our talks,
mhm,
you know, most of the correlation of the things that you created and have brought to my attention have had the opportunity to deal with not only the culture of comics and
mhm,
the culture of black comics,
mhm.
it's also dealt with the culture of music and black music.
Yes, yes.
So
Mhm.
when it comes full circle, you're not just delving into stories, you're delving into real life beings and
Yeah,
how they
absolutely,
almost are foretold as mythical beings to us,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
how they've been constructed. MF Doom being for one. Most
Oh yeah,
people see him as this starlight of a figure,
you're right. Yeah, he's
somebody
larger
that
than life,
is supremely larger than life. And then you
and
do
that's
it
and that's by design.
that
You know.
exactly by design. Then you do it
Hmm.
again with
Hmm.
old ODB,
Yeah.
with,
Hmm.
with Old Dirty Bastard. Like basically the nuance of a person like him outside of the Wu Tang Clan.
Yeah.
You almost look at him as somewhat of a wall that you can't get through. Be like, what makes him him? He's totally
Man.
different than everybody.
Oof. Let me tell you something, man. That project hasn't come out yet. This is Oddities.
I
Was
can't
it
wait to get it in my
Oddities?
hands, by the way.
No, absolutely. It's Oddities, Discords, and B-sides, Lyrical Ruckus in the City. And it's a trade paperback that was put up on Kickstarter a few months back,
Oni
and it's
Press.
but from Oni Press. And basically it's a series of short stories that deal with the various uh personalities of Old Dirty Bastard. And
Hmm.
so, you might get a Dirt McGirt, you might get a Unique Ason, you might get Big Baby Jesus. And you get to play with these characters in these different genres. I was really fortunate enough to get a chance to do a horror story.
Mm.
And I got to play Evil Dead, but with Old Dirty Bastard. you know
Ah.
and that was a lot of fun to do. Sorry, my bad. Two things are going on right now. My hair is wet.
It's all good, brother.
And I think I broke my headphones right before I came on here. I just realized it's kind of dangling by a thread. We'll worry about that later. Um, but yeah, no, and again, like the mythology thing. I mean, it's actually a trifecta at this point. I kind of been joking that I've been doing this in an unintentional New York trilogy for like the last couple of years,
You
which
have.
is right. It's not intentional. It just kind of worked out that way, which I did the MF Doom, and then I went and did Chuck D, Apocalypse 91, A Revolution Never Sleeps,
Hmm.
and then I did ODB. And each of those rappers are wildly different.
Yeah.
Like, but they all come from New York, right? And even in each situation, I realized like I'm being responsible for being was it Larry Hama said one time, you're the custodian of mythology, right?
Hmm.
And I really love that because this is their stories, right? And you have to respect that. And so you have to be a custodian in terms of continuing on the myth. And I feel like I've been fortunate enough to be at least in a position to do that at least three times.
Right.
So it's been a fascinating ride. And yeah, the ODB book is interesting because I mean, you hear me talking right now. I had to figure out how to talk like ODB.
Uh, and the
You
thing
know?
is, I think the subset, like take for instance, like the character of ODB, and I'm sure you kind of like dipped into like the storylines and everything. I remember the classic Yo MTV episode where he basically took a limo to go get pick up his food stamps.
Sam's, yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right, right,
You know, like
right,
he took a
right,
limo with his kids, his woman. They over there just we going to go pick up our food stamps. We gonna keep it pushing.
right.
Like those are the things that were like, yo, why would somebody do that? You know, like these are just like the certain things that might seem as relative as confusion, but just
Hmm.
seems like a regular day for ODB.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean that was some of the fun challenge because it forced me to go back and re-listen to his stuff. And I think even me, like I'm an 80s kid. So by the time Wu-Tang was rolling around, like I was like in junior high school, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so
93, yeah,
I had that initial wave of knowing all the stuff that got music videos. That's basically how that worked, right? Stuff
yep.
that got played on the radio. I think it was until I got to college that I started to backtrack, you know, and that's when I started listening to the previous. I like starting listening to the albums in their entirety, and truthfully, that was one of the gateways that got me to MF Doom in a
Mm,
lot of ways.
that's good. That's
Got me to,
true.
got me to Jean Grey, got me to MF Doom, got me to
Marcus
uh,
Records.
Raucous Records, right? Like, I mean, truly, that was like a gateway for me.
Hmm.
And to this day, I swear to you, like Ghostface Killah is easily one of my top three favorite MCs.
Absolutely.
So, um, yeah, but like after experiencing this and going through this book, I'm putting ODB on that list as well
Mm,
because he's he's just such a unique personality. And one of the things, and I kind of felt like I was justified in believing this for so long, but one of the things I've always felt about hip hop is that, you know, lyrical skill is a portion of it, but presentation is huge. And when I talk about presentation, I'm not just talking about how you look, I'm talking about the sound of your voice. You know what I mean?
hmm.
Like Biggie has a very distinctive voice.
Oh yeah.
Big Pun has a very distinctive voice, you know.
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to knock any of the newer rappers, but there are a lot of them that kind of sound the same,
Sound the same. Yes.
you know. And but those people with those unique voices, like, they embody in their voice, they embody the essence of hip hop. And
Right.
ODB is definitely one of those. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it took for, I guess it took for certain characters, and I'm sorry to even bring up the fact that certain MCs were
Hmm.
more so brought up in the fact that they played certain characters. Ludacris
Yes.
does it,
Yeah.
Busta
Oh
Rhymes
yeah.
does it,
Hmm.
ODB does it.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm going to be a particular persona
Hmm.
that's going to be visualized not only on camera, but the way that you hear me in an audio.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to come out supremely different than you've ever heard anybody spit. Like hearing
Right.
Rakim spit a
Yeah.
16 is
Hmm.
totally different than you hear ODB or Busta Rhymes spit a 16.
Right.
It
100%.
sounds wild.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it sounds reckless,
Hmm.
but yet constrained to the point where you totally understand it.
Right.
It's not, yeah,
It's clear. It's
it,
legible.
it's
Like,
absolutely legible.
Yeah. 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 Now I will say this about ODB. Like the deeper I got into his process, well, if you want to call it a process,
Hmm.
right? But the deeper I got into the mania that was ODB, the more I understood like they would put him in the booth and let him go.
Yeah,
And then they would come back and edit around him, like, and some rappers and some producers are very much rigid, like, they like, I have my lyrics written down, I'm going to say these lines, and then we're going to get out of here.
yeah,
And with ODB, it was always from my perspective, from what I've noticed, and everything I've read about him, and all the videos I've watched about him, um free flowing, like, you just have to keep up.
hmm,
And that is also fascinating to me because there's something about breaking the mold and drawing outside the lines, I like to say, that also embodies where I am creatively at this point and what I want this magazine to feel like. So,
right, right,
yeah.
right. Now, as far as the magazine is concerned, what is the overall perspective challenge that you seem to want to build in creating
Hmm.
this magazine to be not only just an annual thing, maybe a monthly thing, maybe even a weekly thing? How
Hmm.
do you see the challenges going forth?
Oh man, you trying to turn me into Shonen Jump?
Hey, hey, look, we trying to
Yeah.
win here.
We're trying to win here. I mean, look, I'm not trying to be a taskmaster because I know Shonen Jump, they putting the artist through it.
Oh man.
Yeah, but no, Afrofutures is a concept album in magazine form,
Hmm.
since we're talking about music. If I could just backtrack for a second, um, I've been watching Book of Clarence,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
kind of made me again just feel like the marriage between the image and the sound is so very unique and very important. That's something that movies have. That's the one thing I think movies have over comics,
Hmm.
is that unique marriage
Yeah.
of the moving picture with sound. But it really has gotten me to think a lot about, like, again, I try to be a student about things. I remember when John Woo started making movies in America, and
Mm.
they were talking about, yeah, I'm taking it back, sorry.
Gun fu, baby.
Right. I remember when John Woo was making movies in America for the first time, or I guess it was like his second attempt, and right before Face Off, I think around Broken Arrow. And they talked a lot about how John likes to pace and plot to music.
Mm,
And I remember taking that to heart. And there are a lot of directors that actively do that. I think Quentin Tarantino made that, really popularized that idea,
hmm.
um, in Hollywood at least. But yeah, it's an interesting marriage that once you're telling a story, you kind of like can hear it.
Yeah.
And so our master of ceremony in this magazine is an artificial intelligent robot named 808.
Hmm.
And she's kind of looking back at us from the future, and she incorporates music into every article and comic inside of it. And that's she's letting the narrative beat build issue to issue. And so she really is the MC of the book. And I guess the best way I could describe it is, depending on your age, the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt,
Yep.
or Tom from Adult Swim. You know what I mean? I'm sorry,
Oh,
from
tsunami.
Toonami.
Tsunami.
Yeah, from Toonami. Stuff like that. That's kind of her role in all this, is to kind of guide you through the issue to issue. And so she is the first story in this book, and she'll always be the first story in every issue. But then we're going to branch out into stories like All Negro Squad. We're going to be branching out into stories like, sorry, I was also at a convention this weekend, so I hope I don't have con crud.
No.
But um, All Negro Squad. We've got a cyberpunk boxing story in there. We've got a story about a space marine that's basically trying to like cook his last meal.
Yeah.
We've got a story in there about actually we got a story in there about Jay Dilla that's based off of the Erica Badu story Telephone, and guess who makes an appearance in that? Old Dirty Bastard.
Uh,
Um, so yeah, there's some really good stuff in there. There's also an article in there about I'm sure you heard about, well, I'm assuming you've heard about like Timbaland is talking about using AI to create the vocals of legends and make new music
I
about
do
it.
remember him talking
Yeah,
about that, and I also
yeah.
remember him catching a lot of flack about
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we're gonna examine that. There's an article in the magazine about that. There's also an article in the magazine about All Negro Comics, which is actually the catalyst for the comic book that we're making called All Negro Squad.
Hmm.
Um, so and so music plays a factor here in a lot of ways because first of all, what we have right now, and let me make sure I get this right, is we've got a metal guitarist, Nelson Blake, doing All Negro Squad. The Josephine Baker story was originally designed by Evie Glenn, and so he's a jazz singer actually over in the UK.
Mm,
We have another guitarist. We've got a DJ who's going to basically be doing the promo work for 808, and her name is DJ Candy Crush. And so we've got a music journalist who's going to be doing the Timbaland article. You know,
mm.
so we're really trying to kind of come at this from the perspective of we're not just making we're not just trying to like shove out something. We want to give you something that feels special when you get it in the mail or
Yeah.
when you pick it up, and something that really feels like an experience, and something that feels it has a theme to it, even though you're getting a bunch of different stories in the process. So a lot of bang for your buck, hopefully.
Yeah, because you obviously, I remember you when you brought this to me in the beginning, you said it was going to be somewhat of a healthy marriage between music and comics.
Yeah, yeah. This is a like an artistic jam session. You know,
Mm,
I've heard a lot of creators actually compare making comics to being in a band.
yeah.
And when you kind of look at it, it kind of works out because there's like what four components of making a comic, and there's like about four or five components of making a band of your basic garage band, right?
Yep.
And so yeah, there's an interesting thing there, which is like we're trying to give the reader a listening party experience almost, and music will be factoring into that in a big way because of it.
Now, is there a method in order to bring forth a way that you could actually read the comic and also listen to it sonically?
So that is something we're actively working out right now. And I just found out recently that vinyl is actually really cheap.
Bro, I collect vinyl.
Right.
The
Yeah.
distribution of, or better yet, the creation of vinyl is very cheap.
Yeah. Well, I should say specific because I also collect vinyl. But like, yeah, that's what you mean, right? The distribution of it is actually a cheaper process than I thought.
Correct.
So we're going to talk about that some more because I'm going to talk to DJ Candy Crush about that because she's working on a few promo pieces in the for the magazine that I think should probably get like some sort of physical medium, because that's another big thing here is like I want you to hold it. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually make this digital or not.
Mm,
Like if we do the Kickstarter, maybe there won't be a digital tier. Maybe you'll have to pick this up physically, and it'll come to you physically, and that's just an extension of giving you an experience.
see, now we're talking. Now, now, also instructionally with that, like, how did you get to the point where not only did you want to enable this to be somewhat of a concept album sorts in a magazine form, but also in a sense, how did you approach the fact of where you're having artists doing comic strips inside of this magazine?
That's this has been part of this is I get to curate this, right?
Mhm.
And so the deal here is that like yes, I have at least three stories, I'll say three and a half stories in the magazine itself. But I'm also being joined by a couple of other writers like Jason Pierce, Erica Hardison. Um, and so we're going to be telling these stories uh, But in some cases, they just happen to tell me that this is something they wanted to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I was sort of like, well, why don't you do it over here? You know?
Right.
In other cases, uh, with Jason, like we had both worked on the ODB book and we were just talking shop, you know? And he wanted to do this story about gypsy cab drivers because he's a Jamaican descendant.
Mm-hmm.
And like, he's got family who drive gypsy cabs. And so I was
Yeah.
like, let's do that. And the more we talked about it, it became a story, just a sci-fi story. I don't know how that happened, but it did.
I don't know why it just like brought a smile to my face. I don't know.
Uh,
Maybe it's the Bajan uncles and grandfathers that I had about a gypsy cab rolling through New York City. That
there you
shit
go.
that just
Hmm.
busted me out for a second.
Good,
But
good,
that's
good, good.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And we got some great artists on this, man. Like that was the other part of this is like I'm not a fan of. I feel like they're getting away from this now, but I'm not a fan of the thing that the big two used to do like a couple years ago, where it's like put Alex Ross on the cover and then the interiors are like booty.
Uh yeah.
You know what
No,
I
you're
mean?
right.
Yeah, and so my whole thing is Nelson Blake is on the cover drawing all Negro Squad, and he's doing the comic on the inside of the book itself. You know what I mean? And we're making sure that we're at least pulling in people that have a unique style and a unique vision, and almost a musical style in itself.
Hmm.
But we're also pulling in like just really good artists. Like that's the other part of this is just like pairing them with really good writers and having them elevate themselves. Like you know what I mean to whatever happens when you get into a collaboration with somebody because that's also the point of this is collaboration.
Right. Are you seeing yourself basically bolstering a lot of like first time writers, first time creators adding their essence to this, or are you getting more established people?
So I think part of this has to feel a little bit anti-establishment. It has to feel independent. It has to feel small press, and it can't really jive with like elite attitudes, right?
Hmm.
And so for that reason, I'm trying to find people that aren't names, I guess you want to say, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term. I'm getting truthfully, I mean, I've been doing some of the interviews with creators over the last several years that they're just people that I just literally have jotted down, like, come back to this dude because he's being underutilized. Come back to this girl because she's like really got something here, you know?
Hmm.
You just kind of walk around conventions for 10 plus years, and eventually you're just sort of like, why isn't this person getting more work?
Yeah, this is true.
You know? And then you're sort of like, and I mean, and the other great thing about this is you see them not getting much work, but they're still driven by their craft.
Hmm.
And that's how I knew it. That's how you know you want to work with these people. So yeah, it's a mishmash of a bunch of things. Like, yeah, Erica came to me with this telephone idea.
Erica's dope, by the
Jason,
way.
no, Erica's dope. Erica's great. And I need to go on her podcast too, actually.
Hmm.
Jason came to me with the Gypsy Cab idea. I pitched one story to this girl named Lee Strawberry, and now she's kind of building it out. That's why I was saying 3.5 stories. But also, I mean, again, this is also about collaboration. So once you marry it up with her artist and they start going, and then you start jumping in with dialogue again, and like you're going back and forth, we're all writing it at that point,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's a big part of this is just, I want to get across that, comics are made by a collective and a collective of artists specifically. So
Mm. Now, essentially, like, what do we look for as far as like the drop date for this?
so I am looking at June. That's the goal. Is like we're
Okay.
going to land this on June, and so it's going to run through Juneteenth up until the probably the last week of June or the first week of August. And I'm toying with the idea, and I will actually take opinions on this. Like seriously, I'm toying
Okay.
with the idea of June Kickstarter, and then it drops either in time for Christmas or drops in time for Black History Month.
You know what? That's not a bad idea.
So I'm deciding which one of those I want to do this for. Um, but artwork's already in. Like there's definitely some artwork in, quite a bit of artwork in at this point. And I've given everybody a an April deadline. So we're
Right.
rocking and rolling on several fronts. And so if I'm a little scrambled and you see me in person and I look a little crazy, it's because I have like 8 stories floating around in my head all at the same time.
And that's all
Because
right.
I'm also playing editor, so
And as far as distribution is concerned, like,
Mhm.
is there more so of a plan of how you're looking to get the word out? Of course,
Um,
me and you were talking right now, but as
yeah,
far as
yeah.
like the extension of creators out there that are more so delving into the fact of the way to push your product
Mhm,
out to the masses,
mhm.
how does that unfold?
Well, I mean, I am thinking about a crowdfunding option, of course, right?
Mhm,
And my hope here is that people truthfully will just start to notice what we're doing over here and see that it's really, I mean, it really is different from what other people are doing right now, at least in this, particularly in the black nerd space. You know what I
mhm.
mean? And so yeah, we can just expand and grow from there and just create something that is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm hoping, and I'm just kind of feel like people will kind and I mean, it's built to be sensational too, right? Like that's the other
Right,
part of
right.
this, right? Like if I told you there's a story in the book where where a white militia tries to turn President Obama into a zombie, like, does that make you perk up?
Yeah,
Does that make you wonder what that is? Right.
yeah.
So that's kind of the route we're taking is it's got and that's why it has to be 17 plus. And when I say 17 plus, I'll put it in these terms. We're probably going to be going for a 1980s PG-13, not a 2024 PG-13, if that makes sense.
And look, in 1980s PG-13 is not that bad. If we're talking about Creep Show, Tales from the Crypt, as you described earlier,
Right.
and anything
Yes.
like that.
Gremlins, like
Yeah.
that's the minimum of where how low we're willing to go in terms of softening the content. Um and yeah, and it just depends on the story, truthfully. Like, I always want to be tasteful just because I think that's important. I think being tasteful about things is part of making art.
Mhm.
But at the same time, being sensational about things is also about making art.
This is true.
So I'm just finding the line with each story.
How are you feeling? And this is spitballing. How are you
Mhm.
feeling about the black comic space right now? Like, have you found any inspiration by some things that have come out recently?
I mean, yeah, I think that people are doing a lot of great things. Like I continually, I kind of have had this consistent wave with Rodney Barnes stuff,
Yeah.
that has been sustained since about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And so every time I kind of rediscover something by him, I am immediately like, this is really good. you know, and I am actually really like I'm like I'm sucked into it, whatever it is, whether it's Winning Time or Nita Hawes, you know what I mean? I'm immediately sucked into it.
Yeah. And he's
There
still
are
doing
look,
Philadelphia.
he's
Right.
still doing Philadelphia, right? And so there are, yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the space for sure. And I think that's on the positive side. On the negative side, like if I had to be honest with you, it's just, it's like it's what I explained before, is that a lot of us seem very preoccupied with existing IP. I can't tell you how often I open Facebook or Twitter and it's just sort of like people yelling about I'm sorry, I hate this conversation so much. So I'm gonna single it out because I saw it again today.
Mhm.
Why Denzel Washington and Giancarlo Esposito should play Magneto and Professor Xavier.
Right.
And, it's like every couple months. And to the point that at this point I'm starting to think like maybe someone's actually paying to like have this conversation over and over again.
Right.
But uh to me that's a ridiculous notion. Those are white characters. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And why are we so up the ass of these white characters all the time? We had like 6 X-Men movies
It's true.
and they didn't get it right all
Right.
6 times.
So what makes you think that a black Magneto and a black Professor X are gonna get it right?
But even still, I mean, even beyond that, we've had 6 X-Men movies. They haven't gotten it right 6 times. But then on top of that, you're asking them to make white characters, black, right?
Mhm.
But the other part of this is Bishop's right there.
Bishop's right there. Storm's
Storm's
right
right
there.
there. Storm has never gotten a big movie moment,
Ever.
ever. I don't care what you say. Her spinning around like a tornado in X-Men 3 is not
Oh
it.
my god, man.
You know what I mean? Like they did Storm dirty. Bishop barely had any lines.
Bishop's origin story is probably one of the greatest stories ever created, and people don't talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole thing is, like, I mean, look, Darwin, they did him dirty in First Class.
Dirty.
You know, Angel also did her dirty in First Class as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so my whole thing is, hey guys, we're focused on the wrong aspects of this. If anything, we need to be propping up the existing characters that help build their legend so other Black actors can play them throughout the years, you
Right.
know? And I put it out like one of the things, this is just me ranting now, but one of the things I often go back to is a tale of two Michael B. Jordans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the tale of two Michael B. Jordans. I believe Creed and the Fantastic Four movie that he was in came out the same year.
Yes, the first
All
one.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And one was received horribly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that had anything to do with really Michael B. Jordan, but I'm just making a point here.
Yep.
And the other was received like widely praised enough to make to make two more movies out of it, and
Yep.
probably four, five, six, seven, eight.
Yep.
Right?
He started a franchise.
You started a fran you started a franchise. Now look at that. What is that? You know what I mean? And I just kind of remember when the trailer for Creed dropped, and then I saw that Fantastic Four trailer, and people were all like arguing with people about why Johnny Storm should be black. I'm like, here's the problem with that. If I was a kid and I saw this black version of Johnny Storm, and then I go back to the comics and there's a white version of Johnny Storm, and then all the toys are versions of Johnny Storm, and
Yeah.
all the old video games are white versions of Johnny Storm. It doesn't feel this. It doesn't have the same impact,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But Creed, here's a character that was in the first Rocky movie. Here's a character that was in the second Rocky movie. He had
Yep.
this epic death, right? And
Yeah.
now we come full circle and tell the story of this guy's son. And
Mm-hmm.
what did he do with it? He built a franchise from it. And guess what? Now that movie has black dollars behind it, black dollars going into it, black dollars coming out of it. That's important. And yeah, and so that's if there was a gripe about the black nerd space that I have right now, it's just that there's too much enthusiasm for that stuff and not enough enthusiasm for our stuff.
Absolutely. And see,
Yeah.
this is why I like talking to you, man.
Thanks.
It sucks we don't get to talk often, but
We don't. No, no. Yeah,
no, we
yeah.
don't get to talk often, and that's why I like talking to you, man. So
Thanks,
I
man.
look, for one, I appreciate your desire for wanting to push out the projects that you want to behold, and the
Hmm.
way that you embolden culture and the way that you do.
Thanks, man.
And
Thanks.
this just makes it worldwide. Uh, that you could have the ability to create something and put it in this space, and that people should actually like look forward to it because of the opinions that and the know-how and the knowledge that you basically survey just happen to be put into a magazine, into your comics and everything like that.
Absolutely.
It only pays the difference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't tell by my background, I'm a bit of a pop culture junkie. So
Yeah. Akira's just standing back there. That's
Akira's
fine.
just standing right there.
That's fine.
So, I mean, this is, it's, it's important to me. Like, people talk maybe not enough about media literacy,
Mhm. Yeah.
the things we watch, why we watch them, how they're being distributed to us, why they're being distributed to us. And that's not even to get into conspiratorial territory, know. But I think it's important to understand what these things are saying
Yep.
and why they're saying them, where they come from, and why, and not to just consume them just because they're consumable, but also understand that certain type of money goes into these things, certain type of money comes out of these things, certain opportunities are left on the table with these things. And I mean, this is some of the stuff is what Cat Williams was talking about.
This is true.
Some of the stuff is what Taraji P. Henson's been talking about.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's not that bizarre of a thing that I'm saying.
Right. And
So
I noticed that you said Taraji, and of course, DMV once again.
DMV, right?
DMV again. So look,
Right.
black people know shit. All right, so
There you go.
you know what I'm
There
saying?
you go.
But essentially, I think the overall conclusion is that the means to putting out uh Afrofutures as a magazine is
Mm.
what?
The means to putting it out is going to be Kickstarter. It looks like at this point. If that's what you're asking, is that what you're asking?
No, just a means of what you want to accomplish in putting it out.
Oh, what I want to accomplish? I just look, Black History, Black Futures, Black Beyond. There you go. Boom.
There it is. Troy, it's
Thanks, man.
always great talking to you, man. This is always like a highlight whenever I get a chance to speak with you. Of course, when we've
Thanks, man.
had the opportunity to talk about projects before in the past, it's always been like a great discussion, and I feel like this is another one, man. I thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for keeping on me so that I can
Yeah.
come back around and
Look,
finally
man,
do this.
always, always. So for myself, James Grandmaster Facts voice, Troy Jeffrey Allen, you can check him out on Previews World right now. You can check out his comics on RexCo Comics, and
Mhm.
look forward, of course, in June if we get this out in time for AfroFutures, the magazine.
Oh, we getting
So
this out in time. We getting this out in time.
we
Trust
getting
me.
this out in time. So for the Facts Project, we are out.